you sit with him and say, okay, give me your vision, and then we go from there, and I start dealing with production and lighting? Or how do you even organize that, man, for a show so huge?
From what you're saying, logistically, that's how it goes.
Mm.
But in this specific situation,
TrevBeats Show, TrevBeats Show.
My guest today is a master musician, a killer saxophone player, and the musical director for arguably the biggest artist on the planet right now. He's a Berklee alumni who cut his teeth in the trenches with everyone from Prince to the Jonas Brothers. He's part of a legendary horn section, the Horns, and he has successfully bridged the gap between high-level jazz musicianship and global stadium pop. He just came off stage from directing one of the most culturally significant performances in history at Super Bowl 60. And without further ado, I want to bring on my brother, Miguel Gandelman. Bro, what's up, man?
how are you?
Oh, man, I'm good, but I definitely ain't as good as you, my brother. I can't. First of all, thank you for coming on. I know it's a crazy schedule. Also, your birthday, just TrevBeats. Everybody, happy birthday. It's belated by the time they see this, but I'm telling you right now.
Thank you, man. Thank you. And happy birthday to you too, man.
Thank you, man. Mine is yesterday. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So, first of all, I want to get into you as a saxophone player, and a lot of people don't know this lineage, and I love people to really get to know how people come to be where they are. So, first of all, you're a legit, actual jazz saxophone player that went to Berklee. So, what was that journey like before you headed into your other job, which we'll talk about? How was that growing up? And where
I'm from Brazil. I'm from Rio de Janeiro.
Mhm.
I'm a fourth generation musicians, great grandparents, grandparents, my parents, everybody, uncles, aunts, cousins, you know what I mean? And it was one of those things, I was born into it. It wasn't really a choice as much. I mean, it is a choice because, my sister, for example, she went into financial world, and, like my dad said, somebody has to make money, right?
Right.
But yeah, man, it was a thing. It was my family. My father was a saxophone player as well, and he went to Berklee, but he never finished.
Oh, wow.
He did 2 years. So it was a thing since I was a kid, it was kind of like a promise of, you're going to do that in life. And it was always a mission for me, So moved to the United States. My father signed with Verve. And once that happened, we came over here, and, life being life, my parents got divorced at the time. He went back. My sister and I were stayed. She went to University of Chicago, and I went to Berklee. And that was like the dream to come true, And yeah, I play piano. My grandma, she is a professor, doctorate professor in school, concerto pianist, and all of us had to take piano lessons from her. And I was, always very interested in music. So piano, saxophone, it was always around me, man, especially with my dad, an artist and everything, it was something that I just saw in front of me. And my dad, he was a saxophone player. He was an arranger. He was a producer. He was a music director. And just being in that household, I always thought every musician, that's what you do. You do all of these things. I never had a separation in my mind of, I assumed everybody did that,
Mhm.
And because my dad was a music director, arranger, composer as well back in the day, he was, when the first computers, when the first Logic, which was Notator Creator back in the day, he had that at home. And he was always programming and doing things. And, what your dad is doing, you kind of want to do it as well. So I got into programming, 9 years old, I think, 8 years old. I programmed my first song. It was Chariots of Fire. My dad helped me. I called it Metals, and I would just come home, and he would be asleep, and he was working the night before. And I would just open the computer and try to figure things out, and, started making beats for the girls in class and stuff like that, So programming was a thing that was part of my upbringing as well, not just playing the saxophone or the piano, and come to find out later that it was a thing. I was at Berklee. I remember having my computer, in the dorm room, and people coming to the room and being like, man, you got an orchestra in that computer? Like, what's that? Oh my God, and I always thought all that stuff was normal because it was done inside of my house,
Right.
So, those were the two things that, saxophone, like you said, I had an incredible, thankful career as a saxophone player, and then when it got over to the music director side, it had a lot to do with programming and being able to do that and arrange and put things together, which was always part of my life as well. I never had a separation of those things.
Well, it's amazing how life sometimes prepares us for things that we don't even
Yeah.
think about what's happening. It's coming in all these different directions. And man,
Yeah.
it's so funny. We have such a similar thing because my dad's a sax player and arranger, and our birthday's a day apart. Like,
Yeah.
the computers hit me also at the same age. And
Yeah.
it's like, you never know when this stuff is going to be called on. And
Yeah.
for you, I mean, first of all, you worked with so many people. I mean, I was doing some research, and it's like, from Prince to, all these different people. And you have your horn section, the horns, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's renowned. And, working your way up as a saxophone player and a horn player and an arranger and all that's cool. But then we get that call that only a few of us now remember. Out of everybody doing this music, it's only a handful of people that are ever going to be able to be on that field, man. So when you get that call, it's automatically changing the trajectory of your history, you know what I'm saying, as a musician, because that is a very small slice of all musicians. And then when you get to be the musical director, it's even more exclusive. So you are the musical director for Bad Bunny's Super Bowl 60, which is the greatest Super Bowl show I have ever seen.
Oh,
And
man.
I'm telling you, that was the greatest show I have seen, as far as, because a lot of people don't understand until you get there. I had the privilege of doing it as well. So it's like you realize when you get there, the focus is really TV. You know what I'm saying? When you're in the audience, you don't get all the camera magic and all the stuff. So as far as coming through the TV, bro, sonically and visually, hands down the best by far
Man,
that I've ever.
thank you.
Yeah, man.
Thank you. I
And
appreciate
no, all good. And so, leading up from being the saxophone player and cracking working musician, there's no slouch on that, but getting from that to this, how did that happen? How did you go from what you were doing to being the MD? And are you the MD always or just for the Super Bowl?
No, I've been for the past, I want to say, almost 10 years now.
Yeah,
That's
so the whole time. Right. So the whole time. I'm mad I missed that audition, but go ahead. It's okay. So,
man, look, I feel very fortunate, man, to have had an incredible career as a saxophone player with the horns, with the guys, man. We were able to do a lot. It was a very, very blessed path that we had together. I went to college with Ray. I don't know if you remember Ray, the trumpet player from the horn section.
wow.
And we had a band in college, and I finished school and I went to New York, with that dream, I'm going to be the next John Coltrane type of thing, and New York was hard for me, man. It was probably some of the toughest time in my life, and things weren't really happening. And at the time, he is a year older than me, so he had graduated already. He was here in LA, and he was like, man, I got a horn section. And the saxophone player, he is, his wife is pregnant. We're going to go on tour with Eric Benet. Do you want to come? Maybe da-da-da. I packed both bags. Man, I'm not having a good time in New York. New York was beating me up. I'm thinking California. I'm from Rio. The sun, the beach. Maybe that'll be it, something, And I remember Ray picking me up at LAX. And, first thing we sit in the car, he's like, hey, man, just to tell you, you don't really have the gig. It's kind of an audition. And I was like, Ray, man, oh my God, I just packed all my bags, But at the time, it was Rob Lewis. It was the Movement Orchestra, Ray and I, we had this camaraderie already from school. And and it was within 15, 20 minutes of rehearsal, Rob looked back and he was like, welcome to the family, and that was how things started for me as a saxophone player and all of that. We started playing with all these people, the Movement at the time with Rob. There was, it was like the cool hot thing, So we did Christina, we did Babyface, we did a whole bunch of things that connected us to Ricky Minor. Eventually, we started working with Ricky, who was doing American Idol and all these things. One day, out of nowhere, man, Ricky calls me. We had just gotten back from tour with the Jonas Brothers, which was the craziest tour at the time, 2009. It was like some Beatles stuff,
Right.
Like I've never seen anything like that, ever experienced anything like that. It was a once in a lifetime thing. And I was at the supermarket with my wife, and Ricky calls and he's like, hey, man, you sitting down? I said, no, I'm not sitting down. He was like, well, maybe you need to sit down. I was like, what's up, man? What's going on? he was like, "Hey man, would you like to join myself in the band? We're going to be at the Tonight Show band with Jay Leno." And I was like, "Oh my God, my life changed right there," because it was probably the greatest job I've ever had. It was constant money. I was able to buy a house. I was able to now have a family, marry my wife, that changed everything for me as a professional. I was able to do things like that, have a family, get married, have a house. And it was incredible. The saxophone player before me was Branford. It was, the lineage of it all. It was incredible. We are at rehearsal, and one day Ricky says, "I'm looking for programmers because I want to do, more pop oriented songs, and for us to be able to do the pop stuff, I don't have stems for all of these songs, so I need somebody who can program." And I remember going home and calling my mom and being like, "Mom, I know how to do this stuff, but I've never really, should I tell Ricky I know how to?" She was like, "Son, of course. Like, why are you holding back?" So next day I went to Ricky. I said, "Hey man, I program. I know how to do that stuff." And, back in the day, it was a CDR, burn something to a CD. He gave me 2 songs. He was like, program these 2 songs and let me see what you got type of thing. And I brought the CD to him the next day. And once he pressed play on it, he was like, "Oh my God, dude, you know how to do this." So then from then on, so many doors opened through Ricky. Ricky started calling me and he was like, "Let's do theme song for this." He was taking care of Miley Cyrus. "Can you program some stuff for the show?" Boom, 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 this and that. And that's what really got me into the MD world. That was what opened up was, through Ricky and through the opportunities that he had, for me and bringing me in and arranging and programming and doing those things. And I forget exactly how I got the first MD gig, but the first MD gig was Kidz.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It was the first big one that we're going on tour, called me, boom, 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 put the show together, and it just kind of went from there,
Yeah.
and that was kind of the transition of it all. It was through Ricky and that opportunity of, programming and showing him that I also knew how to do that, and him opening these doors for me and then eventually doing my own thing.
Yeah. And so that was, that started you off paying your dues and all that kind of stuff. By the way, I've had 2 of your brethren from Tonight's Show on. I just had Kevin on and I've had Teddy. So,
Beautiful.
Great family y'all have, and everybody's doing wonderful things. So you're paying your dues as an MD, and then the call for this, how does that happen to get the call for Bad Bunny?
Man, you know how it is, man. One thing always, it's one thing leads to another, meeting people and, a friend of mine, a brother of mine, Johnny Natural, he got the gig and he couldn't do it. He didn't have the dates. The creative director happened to be a friend of my wife's. She was at my baby's baby shower stuff. And months before, my wife was talking to her and, they were just having girl to girl conversation. And, and she was like, I wish I was doing more. I don't know, something like that, and my wife was like, "Man, I love what my husband is doing. I would love to introduce you to him, blah, blah, blah," because we hadn't talked in years since my son's, shower and stuff. And she put us together on a text message. "Hey, boom, boom, boom." That kind of stayed right there, and then we did Becky G together. We worked on Becky G together with the creative director. So when Natural couldn't do the gig and he was like, "Man, I can't, but my brother Miga, maybe he could do it," Harriet, who was the creative director, it was just that connection right there. We had kind of in a way already spoken, already done a different gig. And, she also reached out to Charm because Charm was doing the gig and Charm is a friend as well. And Charm was like, "Hell yeah, let's go with Miga." So then it just happened. She calls out of nowhere, late December. "Hey, what you doing? Can we talk?" And I was like, "Ooh." And it was crazy, man. It was crazy. Like I'm not a boastful guy. I couldn't believe it was actually happening until it actually happened. My wife she's my biggest cheerleader, man. Like the first day when I got the call, "Let's go out to eat." We're at the restaurant and the guy's like, "You guys celebrating anything?" I'm like, "No." My wife is, "Yes, he is. Yes, we are. He's gonna be the da-da-da." I was like, "Baby, don't tell people." No.
That's beautiful, bro. Well, and let everybody watching understand this should show you a lot of stuff. I mean, Miguel paid his dues. He was respected by everybody, but when he wasn't in the room, people were speaking on his behalf in a positive way. And then he had his partner, his wife, his biggest cheerleader, who is always, that's one of the best things a musician can have, is a spouse that supports you. And
Yes.
all these things kind of came together with all the upbringing and all the dues, and it led to this moment. So understand, y'all, everything that we do is cumulative, and it all can lead to these life-changing moments, right? So now, fast forward, you're MDing Bad Bunny, who becomes one of the biggest artists in the entire world. And now you're faced with, okay, everybody's hearing the news and you guys have to do the Super Bowl. So logistically, I mean, it's just, I mean, and your show was so many more moving parts even, you know, than the one I was a part of. I mean, dude, logistically alone, how do you start to break that down when it's like, okay, this is what we want? And what's the process? Do you sit with him and say, okay, give me your vision, and then we go from there and I start dealing with production and lighting? Or how do you even organize that, man, for a show so huge?
From what you're saying, logistically, that's how it goes. But in this specific situation, he's the biggest star in the planet. He's in the middle of a world tour.
Right, of course. Right.
Of course, right? Of course he's in the middle of a world tour, and he is very, man, Benito, he is a true artist, man. He's a true artist. He's never had a music director before. Everything has always been through him, you know. It's his concept, you know, he is, you know, creative direction. Everything's through him and his eyes and his brain, you know.
Yeah.
And I commend him, man. He's a true vision. He's got a vision. He's a true artist. No, you know, no slight on anybody else, but that's how he operates, you know?
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily the easiest thing because, okay, first thing, man, I need files. I need stems. Nobody can find stems. Nobody has stems, you know? In a way, it felt like his success, man, was just it was such a rocket ship that became the biggest thing in the world. You know, so the structure of it, like, you know, very simple things like stems, nowhere to be found. Who had some? Where are the hard drives? Who has it? You know, December 25th, 26th, you know, rehearsals start January 4th in LA. We still don't have anything.
Wow.
And we're trying to figure it out. Like, what are the songs? There's a sketch that somebody sent from somewhere. These are the songs that he wants to do, but who says these are the songs that he actually wants to do? So I'm kind of trying to work on that. And that's just a 2-track. I still don't have stems. So I'm doing all the programming tricks that I know to be able to make things work. And Harriet, the creative director, she's like, I'm going to Mexico. He's on tour. I'm going there to talk to him and present him the little sketch that we have. And I was like, great. Maybe the ball will move that way. You know, she gets there. He's really excited about all the visual stuff that she's presenting to him. But he's like, I didn't know you guys were working on music already. Now I'm excited. Now let's talk music. And I was like, okay, so that sketch, I don't know where it came from. I don't know what that is, but scratch that.
Right.
And let's start again. You know, and then it became this thing, man. I had to travel to Chile to record with his band. We recorded 5 songs out there, come back home. Of course, 3 of those songs are gone. So, okay, we got to record some more. We found out Gaga is going to be the artist. Okay, so let me do an arrangement for that. So then I had to go back to Colombia to go record with a band. So it was a lot of chasing around and trying to chase his attention as well, because he's on a world tour, like he's the biggest artist in the world. And, you know, so it was a lot of it was working in the dark, you know, and then towards the very end, he got really involved and he got super excited. You know, I don't know if he's ever had a guy like that, you know, where he's imagining these things and talking back and forth and making it reality,
Right.
you know. So I feel like he just got super excited and he would just send voice messages and voice messages and voice messages while he is, you know, traveling the world. And I'm just over here. Rehearsals had already started. You know, I'm traveling to try to catch the band. I'm like, Charm, I'm so sorry. I'm going to get you some music. I'm going to get you some stuff. For sure, this song is going to happen. For sure, that song is going to happen, you know.
Wow.
And it was just kind of like that, you know, and put it all together in that kind of environment.
So the structure I'm surmising from what you're saying is you've put the show together in a tour, but you don't have to really go out on the tour anymore, right? So is that
I do Yes, that's how I operate with the majority of the artists now.
Right. So yeah, you can. Yeah. So you're not actually. So there, when you're saying he's on tour, it's like, yeah, you still put it together, but you're
Yeah.
now physically having to go be a detective and go try to.
I didn't do his tour.
Right. Right. But you're just having to go, find, hook, connect,
Find him and find the files and record the people, and I'm brand new because I was only brought as an MD for the Super Bowl.
Right.
He's never been an MD before, so
Right.
everything is new. The relationship of him with an MD is new. My relationship with the band and everybody and all of that within a month, and we have to have answers and that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Man, yeah, and it's such a logistical thing. People don't understand. And let's talk about the one thing that maybe a lot of people don't know is that for the most part, Super Bowls are pre-records, right?
Mhm.
So it's like I didn't even know that until I was involved. I really thought that, there was, there's been a few I heard in history. Mostly it's vocals that might be live, but bands I've heard pretty much are all pre-recorded. So
Yeah.
not only do you have to get the show together and create it, then you have to get the take, get the show actually done. That's going to be the take. And then you got dancers and then you got, so how do you, did you stay with it obviously until it happened. So how do you deal with all of the many back and forths and tweaks and stuff that have to happen from dancing and lighting? Can you cut this bar? Can you do this? How do you navigate that?
Man, it's a game of inches. It's a lot of detail and detail oriented.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, that's how I do it all, man. I approach for me, what is an MD? To me, an MD is a live producer.
Right.
You're producing it and making that music like Quincy Jones does in the studio, but you're doing it for a live event.
Yeah.
And not only I approach it that way, musically speaking, but I also approach that way, music production, wise.
Yeah.
We started, he had in his mind, we want to start with reggaeton, then we want to do all the salsa stuff, and then we're going to do the folkloric stuff. Like that was kind of set up in how it was going to be. Obviously, reggaeton is all program stuff, but I approach programming things as a producer as well. So, I'm programming on top, additional, making sounds, transients, the kick is not really hitting how it's supposed to, beef it up, I approach it as a producer, almost like you're making a record, but I'm now making that record for a live. So it needs to hit bigger. Things need to feel bigger, et cetera. And then we got into the salsa stuff and we recorded all that stuff. Once everything was kind of said and done and put together, he had a lot to do. Well, it was the timing, which is part of what we do as a music director, the timing between these songs and the breaths and stuff. We agreed on, I want to say 95% of what I had done. He was like, man, love it.
Awesome.
But I want a breath here. I want a breath over here. Maybe the song can be, we can finish it differently. So coming from him, it wasn't that many details. But like you said, once we get into the big picture of things of cameras, lighting, pyro, that's when the little tweaks in version 47, version 51, that's when it really starts happening. And because everything was last minute, usually a lot of that stuff is already squared away by like early January,
Yeah.
but we didn't have that privilege.
Right.
So a lot of the stuff was happening, last minute with a lot of ASAP.
Sure.
On it,
Of course.
Of
course. Yeah. Of course.
we need to change this and it needs to be done by yesterday type of thing,
Yeah.
But I've always been very detail oriented. Like for me, it's part of it, it's part of our job is to be able to take those details and be organized with those details. And, once the director says I need 2 more seconds here because the camera is going to flip. So we need a little 2 more seconds of the delay. Cool. No problem. Version 48. Here we go. Now we need cool. Here we go. Don't worry. And I'm very involved. I'm very much my own programmer. Like everybody does it in a different way, but I know some MDs who are always with their, playback guy and their programmers and stuff. I don't have that. I'm almost like a one-man team.
Wow. Oh, wow.
You
You're
know?
doing the edits too. You're doing all that.
The whole thing, man. It's just me behind the computer, doing anything and everything. And, My team is pretty much my manager and my mixer. My mixer that's my right hand man. I love him to death. His ears are amazing, man. And that's a lot. That's John Resin.
Yeah, shout out to John.
He's
Great
he's
job.
incredible. He works with me on Mass Singer as well. He's phenomenal, man. His ears are something else, and I'm a team player. I always like to bounce things off of people. I'm not the guy who I feel like I have all the answers. So having John with me is always, hey, man, it's always that bouncing thing of back and forth. But yeah, I'm very involved, man. It's me and my computer, and all of these notes and all these last minute things. I'm just cool. Here it is, version 51. Boom, I send it out. Dropbox is king,
Yeah.
And attention to detail. Attention to detail. That's really the name of the game.
Real quick, if you're new here, welcome to the TrevBeats Show. Make sure you subscribe if you want to stick around. And for the regulars, if you ever feel compelled to throw some extra support our way, check out the membership options next to the subscribe button. It's strictly for those who want to help us do more, but your viewership is support enough. Now back to the show. So compared to a lot of the other artists you worked with, he seems like, obviously, if he did all this stuff leading up, all those years without an MD, he's definitely detail-oriented and knows how to communicate. When it comes to your interactions with him, obviously, he's a huge machine, so, I'm sure your time it may be limited at times, you know what I'm saying, when you can get to him and whatever. But he seems like he's a direct guy, like he knows what he wants. So does he communicate with you ever in ways that shock you, like, musical ways, like, hey man, can you do so-and-so? Like, oh man, yeah, of course. Like, you know what I'm saying? Or is it just very emotional? Like, I just want this to feel like this, or,
he's direct, man. He's singing, voice messages, the end of the Lady Gaga song. I don't want it to end up. I want it to end down. And he's coming up, maybe something like that. Cool. Let's do it. Very specific. I want to finish this other song. Maybe we should put some strings, and he's singing the line. I was like, okay, cool, let's do it. Like, he's very specific to those things. And the other thing with him too, man, is everything's a big secret with him.
Oh, cool. Okay.
He's a very secretive guy. I even saw an interview with him recently that they asked him, once you found out about the Super Bowl, well, who was the first person that you told? He said, I didn't tell anybody for like a couple of weeks. They were like, not even your mom? He was like, no, not even my mom. I just didn't believe that it was true. So he's a very secretive dude. And there was a lot of things that didn't make too much sense.
Yeah.
To me, it did. To me, it did because of our culture. But whole last part where he's coming and he's naming all of the countries.
Yeah. Crazy.
That is just a breakdown of drums. It was his 4 planeros, the planas, which is the panderos, which is different than the Brazilian pandero, because the Brazilian has the cymbals. That's very traditional Puerto Rican, which doesn't have the cymbals, and it's very folkloric of them.
Yeah.
And it was the 4 guys who were in their band. And I just, the creative director told me, look, we're going to have a lot of people on the field, so we need to represent the audio of what you're going to be seeing. Because the guys, like you said, everything's pre-recorded. The guys on the field, nobody was playing. Everybody's just holding an instrument. Yeah. So if there's going to be a massive amount of people, it needs to sound massive. So when I was with the guys, when I was with the band, it was the 4 of them, and they were just switching the instrument between them because there's 3 sizes of the instruments, and they were changing the tuning, right? So we don't have phasing and all that kind of stuff, and it just make massive sounding. And then once I got back home, the frequency of the panderos is very ugly, man. It's very middle heavy, and it's harsh, the mids, mix wise speaking. I wanted to keep that because that's the focus of the tradition, and tradition was everything and culture was everything. But I wanted to make it even bigger and massive. So I put some surdos, like the Brazilian surdo, which the get the dub. I put some hepiki and some stuff, which you get the highs and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But what I was always telling John is make sure that the transient that's coming through is the panderos, because that's what you want to hear. But the massiveness of it all, it's all the programming that I did under it. Even though we recorded, there was like 100 of the different takes of the pandero. That's part of our culture. And you don't need singing on top of it, So to me, it was okay. I was like, he came back and he said, it's imperative that we do the whole entire corte. Corte is the breakdown that they call it. It's imperative that we do that, which means it's actually now 20 seconds as opposed to 10 seconds. But his manager and people were saying, no, he's got something special. He's got something special. He's going to do something special here. So there was a lot of things on the show, all that to say that he knew it within himself what he was going to do, but it was a secret he didn't want to share with us and he didn't want to tell us, you know?
Yeah.
And we only saw what it was going to be and only heard these things that he was saying, I'm going to do it, I'm going to talk here, I'm going to talk there. Dress rehearsal. That was the first time all of us heard, you know, all the countries coming out of his mouth and that whole thing, you know, when the camera, the Spike Lee shot, when he's saying, you know, I'm only here because I believe in myself and you should believe in yourself too. So for all of us who were involved, you know, including his people, nobody knew what that moment and those moments were going to be. So once it came together, man, it was just all of us crying, like tears,
Yeah,
you
man.
know.
Yeah, bro.
It was so strong, it was so impactful, and all that to say his vision once again, and he knew what he wanted, you know, and the timings, you know, this can't be 10 seconds, it has to be 20 seconds, and everybody's like, holy, you know, but it's just drums, man. What do you mean 20 seconds of just, he already had in his brain, I'm gonna say something, and this is kind of what I'm gonna say. I don't know exactly, you know, his timing of how he figured out what he was gonna say, but he already had the vision of that, you know. And we just followed without knowing, you know, and I always had in my mind, culturally, it makes sense. It's going to be okay. You know, it's a lot, you know. So it all kind of came together last minute with a lot of magic and a lot of instruction by him, you know, and us and the magic of it all. I don't know, man. It was very special. I say this, I said to my mom, you know, no matter how hard we strive to make, you know, a good show, to do the best job that we can make, you know, to be the best MD that I could be, to be the best director, to be the best everybody in their own department. There was something extra, man. It was definitely something extra in the air. It was, I don't even think even if he tried, he could have asked for that. You know, there was so many things happening, you know, culturally, politically, so many things. Like nobody asked for two people to get shot by ICE. Nobody asked
Right.
for the whole situation that's happening. And he somehow became the, you know, the face of the opposition in a way. He became the guy who was, and it's not like he was trying for that, you know. It's not like we were trying it ourselves. We were just trying to put on a good show,
Right.
you know. So there were so many, you know, and his special light, his special gift that he has. There were so many things that just came together at once, like almost like this rocket, and it's just boom. It was just like this big boom when it happened. You know, it was very special. It was
Yeah, well,
special.
I mean, man, let me tell you something. When Ricky Martin popped up, I got emotional, bro. It's because where it happened in the show, it was so high, and then that happened. It was like, oh my God. It was just like, dude, what? This
Yeah.
is unbelievable. Like, it was so incredibly done, bro. And I just got to give you your props again. But I also want to say to all my people out there of Latin descent and Caribbean descent, obviously you were touched as well as I was. This is a historic moment, and this Super Bowl performance meant so much more, like you just said, than the Super Bowl. And I actually understand an artist of that stature holding that stuff back till the last possible moment that he had to at least let everybody hear it once, because it gives people too much energy to try to, deflect and change and do all this stuff when you let everybody know your intention. So his purpose was, he knew that moment and he wanted to get that point across. So it's such a high level of respect I have for him and all of y'all that pulled this together, because it means so much more than just a Super Bowl halftime show, man. Especially the time that it came. You know what I'm saying? And I grew up, I played Brazilian percussion. So for me, just seeing all the percussion in general, of course, hearing the samba line, the line, you don't get that, man. You don't get that. It's like this broke all of the norms, and it still was the greatest, just one of the greatest shows. It killed me about the tree people, man. So it's like, when I saw these people with the trees and I saw these shoes, I'm like, leading into the commercial, I'm like, what was about to happen? Right?
It was real. It was real. So it was supposed to be 400. 60 of them had panic attacks like day before, because it was such a tight little situation, so we lost 60 of them, but it was 340 of them. They were just pacing and doing different things, and it worked out. It was great, and the audio dude, he was like, man, this is the new Left Shark, like I already know what I'm going to dress up for Halloween next Halloween, it became a big thing, but it was great. It was
That's
beautiful.
wild, bro.
And it was funny because it was all over the news, before Bad Bunny, he's having auditions for dancers and they have to be a certain height, and people were getting mad and pissed. They were like, the height is actually too tall, and us Latinos, we're actually short, so you're not representing us. And little they know that it was specific to the bushes,
Right, and which is just such a cultural part of the whole setup of the whole thing, and to all those people too, I had to say, to all those people that were, mad about it being in Spanish, you're a hypocrite. Anytime you go to a restaurant and give that broken Spanish that's super actually insulting, you're a hypocrite.
Yes.
Every time you go to Cabo and you're just enjoying all the fruits of people's culture and labor, but you want to talk about this, you're a hypocrite. And but all these artists that you love in America travel all over the world and sing in English.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get mad about that. Other countries don't get mad about that. They welcome it. So let's not be hypocrites, y'all. If you closed your eyes, you would still feel the same thing. Or if you plugged your ears and watch, you would still feel the same thing. So it doesn't matter. It's just an excuse, and it was just a deflection and an obfuscation of, the greatness of it.
The saddest part is where we are in society right now, where everything has to be political.
Right.
Why does a music show, an act, have to become a political? I mean, sure, music and politics, they go hand in hand, but it shouldn't. We're so divided right now. We're so, I'm left, I'm right. I believe in this, I believe in that even a Super Bowl show has become, like everything is, this huge political thing, when it doesn't necessarily have to be that. Entertainment is entertainment, man. It will always be. Music is one of the first things ever. It's the beginning of humankind. So why are we trying to divide ourselves over music?
Yeah, and just because someone's pro something doesn't mean they're anti anything. Then the irony is, and you're right not to get too political, but to point out, in reality, the alternative was, first of all, it wasn't good, creatively, close to what y'all did. Second of all, the headliner created his career from appropriating another culture. And third of all, I believe there's been some discrepancy about lip syncing versus non-lip syncing. You guys did the greatest Super Bowl performance of all that I've seen, definitely in the top 5. And I just have to give you your props once again, bro. Thank you for that.
Thank you, brother. Thank you so much.
So Miguel, man, brother, this is a big thing. And I know you're a low-key guy, you know what I'm saying? But to know that your creative vision touched so many people, man, has to feel incredible, because he had his vision, but you realized his vision. You know what I'm saying? And that brings me to my next question, which I ask everybody, because you're a hands-on guy. First of all, what DAW do you use, by the way?
Logic. I'm a Logic dude.
That's all. That's your whole thing. Playback, everything.
I do Ableton as well, but man, like I said, when my father first started programming at home, it was Notator and Creator. And Notator and Creator were the original Logic before everything, So since I was 8, 9 years old, that's what it's been in front of me. And I just kind of went along with it. When Ableton became hot, I just, sure, let me see what it's all about. Learn from it. Great DAW, but Logic.
Yeah, I used Ableton for about 7, 8 years leading up to this album I did with Drake called Compton. And then after that, I switched back. The MP had started with this new stuff, so I kind of got in that and then went back to Logic a little bit myself. You're a hands-on guy. You do all this stuff. You're a school musician. Wait. You hear me? Oh, the big elephant in the room, AI. So, I didn't hear any interaction. Obviously, on a show like this, I don't really see where it would have a relevance, but you do so much stuff, and you're doing TV, you're doing all these things. I've recently heard that TV is really cracking down on it, movies especially. But what's your view on AI and as a tool? What's your view on AI now as a enhancement to our workflow? Because obviously you come from when things were evolving. So what do you feel about that?
I love it, man. I love it. I'm not scared of it. It's a tool. It's going to enhance and make our jobs in a way, easier. It's a tool. Like I said, it needs to be regulated. Yes. Like everything else, but it's a learned behavior. It has to be injected with something that we create. The humans are, sure, maybe the middleman might lose a job and everything, but to me, it's a tool. From everything that I've seen, I think it's an incredible tool. I can't wait to actually need an excuse to use it. I haven't needed it yet, but I'm sure I'll get there. I'm also the guy who, when everything is hot, I'm always against it.
Right.
Well, like when Macs became super cool, when they had the surgeons, I was saying, man, the hell with Macs, man. Give me my PC, Like when everybody's talking about something, I don't like to follow like that,
Yeah.
So I'm still hanging back. I've never really used ChatGPT in my life. My wife is all about it. Who knows it, that's her thing. She's so about it. But I'm kind of like, whatever, guys. It's too hot right now. I'll take my time and I'll get to it. But I see it as a tool, man. I really do see it as a tool, and I just think it just has to be regulated, like anything else, because specifically it's a learned behavior, and there is the political conversation, or however you want to say it, of these are learned, right? A lot of this stuff is learned. So copyrights, right? Our CAA and the big lawsuit that they have, because these are learned songs, learned behavior that you're just remaking now. Sure, we need to regulate all of that, but I think it's great, man. I'm pro technology. I've always been for technology, and I think technology helps us tremendously in our lives in so many different ways.
Yeah. And exactly, man. I mean, most of the create, everybody that's working, I've never seen have an issue. It's only people that really aren't in the mix that always got something to say. I mean, somebody in one of my shows said, man, you don't need any tools if you ain't working.
Man, it's a cyclical thing, right? Like when the drum machines came in, oh my God, musicians are going to lose their jobs. Oh, when the horn patches came and became cool in the 80s, oh my God, horn players are going to lose their job. Like, it's technology. We've been evolving. Now you can burn CDs. Oh my God, Napster, it's going to kill music. It's always, even in the beginning when radio first came out, oh, that's the end of music, right? No, we just need to learn how to regulate it and use technology for, look at iPhone,
Yeah, exactly.
Look at an iPad, how much it helps us in our day to day,
Yeah. Are you Mac these days? Are you Mac now? Or are you still PC?
Nah, I've been Mac. It was just the beginning. It was just back in the 2000s, when first iMacs, and when they put that money into Mac and Mac became the biggest thing, I was like, man, the hell with Mac. Man.
Yeah, you know what? When you decide to get into the other side of AI, like I'm heavily in it, and I have a couple apps on the App Store that may be able to help you with some of the things, once you jump in. But bro, all good. I'd love to, anytime you want to talk about that, man, that's a whole conversation. Because I believe in it too, man. Even the other non-musical, ways, it's incredible, the workflow. So before we get out of here, bro, for the young cats watching, and of course, they want to be where you are. I mean, everybody wants to be there, right? But we know that they had to practice, and we know they have to get their actual skill together. That's the first and foremost thing. But whether it's like people management, budgeting, or something else that a lot of people don't talk about, which is the psychology of being a leader in that position, what do you need to become, a master stadium level MD like yourself? Like, what is something that's intangible that most people don't really take into consideration?
Honestly, man, I'll go back to the beginning of our conversation. I've been very, very fortunate to come from a family of musicians. So that has shown me so many things, and I'll put it all into the answer. Music is more than entertainment. Entertainment is just one facet of it, right? It's a devotion, it's communication, it's faith, it's so many things, and your love and dedication to music is the number one thing. That should be the number one thing. My grandma is 94 years old, man. She's not doing well. She's in pain every single day, but she has to play her piano every single day to give her life, to get her moving forward. Wow. My father is 7 years old. He's still out there gigging, and that's his life. If you talk to him, he's like, man, I literally just want to be on top of a mountain with my saxophone just by myself, So all that to say, it's like, it's a devotion. Music is something that is beyond just the glory. That's something that I say a lot is, don't do it for the glory. Don't do it. Do it for the love. Do it because you chose this for yourself. Do it out of respect to the art form and what it is, And if you have the respect for music, music will respect you back.
Mm.
You know, all the other stuff, man, it's for me, that's my 2 cents. Everybody operates differently, but to me, all that stuff is for the birds, man. You know, all the attention and all the glitz and glams and all that stuff. No, it's true love and passion for something, you know, and it's like, and it's devotion. Like I say that, you know, like the monks, you know, like religion, like you devote yourself to God, like music is one of those things. And, you know, you have to give it for it to give it back to you, you know, if you're just only concerned about, I want to be the MD of a stadium.
Right.
It might happen. It could happen, you know, but you could also just focus on being the best musician that you can and the love that you have for that art form. And then, you know, that art form gives love back to you, you know, so that's just how I see it. You know, it's just loving music, doing everything that you can to be that thing, to devote to the devotion, that thing that you have with it. You know, I don't want to get too religious with it, but it's the same thing with God. Like, right. It's your relationship. It's how much you put into it, you know, and all the other stuff will come, you know, all that other stuff will come.
Yeah,
That's what I believe.
You get out what you put in. I mean, there's an executive, I won't put him on blast, but there's a story I heard from a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend that's just been passed on, the quote, been passed on so long that always stuck with me, which was, never chase checks, for when you chase them, they run. You know what I mean? It's like, that's the same thing with music. You can't be in it for the wrong reasons, because we all know you've never heard a success story without the story. So it's like, there's people that, you know, think they're going to just come in and it's just going to be this overnight thing, but you got to understand there's usually a struggle somewhere in there, setbacks, you know, between the part going up. Now, we didn't talk about that, just real quick. And there may not have been any, but was there anything that stood out here in this process? Was there one like fail that was like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Or did something fail on the actual show that we might not have known about?
The show itself went amazing. There was no fails. If anything, I was just hoping, because like you said, a lot of the stuff is pre-recorded. The only thing that was live was vocals, everybody's vocals, and the cuatro.
Wow.
And I was concerned about the cuatro. I was like, my God, you know, RF in the inside of that stadium, the amount of things that could go wrong with the RF and all of that. And I was like, no, we shouldn't do it. We shouldn't do it. But he was very big on it needs to be live, because culture, he was always trying to represent his culture. And that is a huge thing for PR, is the cuatro. Right. And I was praying on that one. I was definitely praying, but it went through. I was like, yes, we made it. You know what I mean? But there was no real big failures, man. You know, I think that part of our job and I'm still learning that as well, is notes are going to come, changes are going to happen, you know, so don't get too attached. You know, once you create to put it out there, not to hold on to it, you know? So you're creating for others. You're not creating for yourself. So there's going to be changes. There's going to be things, and just be cool with it, you know?
Yeah. We got multiple trucks, TV trucks, audio trucks, broadcast trucks. It's just unbelievable to even be able to get all these frequencies and stuff to work like that. It's just such an example of things that have to come together, that it is a blessing. Were you, and just not to put you on blast, but were you running any type of redundancy on the track side?
Yeah, I was in Playback. I mean, I do my own programming, all stuff on my computer. Like, I'm the programming guy. But Pablo was running Playback, and he had 3 redundancies.
Got you. Yeah, that's what I'm about to say. And then I just want to set the record straight, because I've heard so many different things. The little kid was him young, yes? That's what the little kid was.
That was the vision. It was, you know, there's this picture of him when he was, I think it was Christmas or something, and he's wearing exactly that, you know, shirt and everything. And it was a representation. It was him looking at himself as a kid and giving himself the Grammy. You know, when that creative thought was had by him, he hadn't won the Grammys yet. You know, none of that. He already had that moment. Everything was already built in there, you know. And when he did win the Grammys, they were like, okay, so on the TV now, we want to put his video of him saying, you know, because we had Tito. Tito was the original sample that, you know, when he won the boxing thing, he claimed Puerto Rico, and that was the one that I put the delay with the, you know, the delay distortion, all that, whatever. But it was just Tito saying Puerto Rico, Puerto Rico, Puerto Rico, Puerto Rico. When he won, they were like, man, we got to put his voice on top of Tito's voice.
Wow.
You know, do the same effect that you had. And now we're going to put that on the screen, and we're actually going to show him winning and calling Puerto Rico out at the Grammys to himself as a kid.
Well, I mean, just And that happened just a week before. So you had to
Yes.
go in and put that in.
And I'm telling you, it was last minute everything. And I'm chasing everything, you know?
Yeah.
But man, it was so cool, man. It was so cool. It was really so cool. And working on TV, that's one of the things you're going to learn, man. Everything's last. Everything is, you know, hey, can I get an opera by tomorrow?
Yeah, no, and you know what? And the real ones deliver, you know?
Yeah.
Definitely a real one, bro. So once again, man, I know you're a low-key guy, so I don't know how many of the interviews we're even going to see with you talking about this, so it makes it even more special that you came here with us, because it's just a historic moment, man, that has affected so many people, bro, including myself. So ladies and gentlemen, man, the incomparable Mr. Miguel Gandelman here on the TrevBeats Show. You know,
thank you, brother.
Yeah, man, such a blessing to have you. And once again, happy birthday, bro.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, Miguel Gandelman on the TrevBeats Show. All right, everybody, that's a wrap for this episode. I hope you picked up some gems today that you can apply to your own craft. Now, before you go, if you want to support what we're doing here, head over to the store. We've got the gear and the merch to get you right over there. Now, don't forget to check out our subscriptions to get exclusive access and tools to help you level up. That's down there, and hit the join button. And if you got value out of this, do me a favor, smash that like button. Make sure you subscribe and drop a comment. Let me know what you thought about today's show. All right, until next time, thanks for watching the show. I'm Trevor Lawrence Jr. and we out.
It's the TrevBeats Show and we out. We out. We out. We out. We out. We out. It's the TrevBeats Show and we out. It's the TrevBeats.